This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put South at the center. I am Dhanya Rajendran, your host.
In this week's episode, we look at the absurdity of targeting Kunal Kamra and why the contempt of court law needs to go.
Joining me in the studio is Nikita, Saxena, an independent journalist. Well, once again, I'm joining you not from the Bengaluru office of the News Minute, but from the Delhi office of News Laundry. Last week, I promised that we would bring you a big story, which is why I was in Delhi last week. And the story was published. It's called the Kiran Bedi tapes. If you haven't read it already, then do go to the News Minute or News Laundry websites. It's an investigation which took many months. We went over thousands of emails and tapes through which we found that Kiran Bedi had asked the Delhi police to tap the phones of her daughter and her partner because they were doing a visa scam. She suspected them of doing a visa scam. Read that story, and I'm in Delhi again because we have more stories planned. They will start rolling out from Friday onwards. So do read all those stories. Some of them will be behind a paywall, but do become a subscriber. A lot of you keep complaining, journalism is dead, investigative journalism is dead. What are journalists doing? Journalism is not dead. Investigative journalism is also not dead. But you have to also do your part by subscribing. So welcome, Nikita, to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
And missing me, sitting in the studio in Bengaluru is Pooja Prasanna, the host of South Central, the host of Let Me Explain and reporting head of the News Minute.
Hi, Dhanya. You're still missing in action.
And there's Leena Reghunath. Leena, hi and welcome to the show.
Hi, Dhanya. You should get back soon.
Yeah, but next week I'm not at all there on the show. Therefore, I shall be back 1 week later. So we are going to discuss a lot of important topics this week, but first we will quickly go through the headlines, Pooja.
YSRCP moves 38 municipal corporators to Bengaluru. This is after they fear defections, and a no confidence motion is looming large over Vizag mayor. Her name is Golagani Hari Venkata Kumari. Now, the TDP-led alliance holds majority right now and they're planning to unseat her. We've covered a lot of these resort politics. It's usually either for Rajya Sabha seat or to save a government. This is the first time that I'm hearing of something like this for a mayoral election. And I just have one thing to add. Please find other places. Stop coming to Bengaluru. That's all I have to say on this.
But then resort politics itself is a low of Indian politics. But here we go even lower with the municipal elections and corporations going for that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And they have to all come to Bengaluru. Like, don't you have resorts in other parts of the country? Please go somewhere else. Telangana's second body recovered from the collapsed tunnel there. The body that has been recovered is of a 50-year-old project engineer. More than a month ago, 8 people got trapped due to roof collapse. And this is, of course, the Sri Shailam left bank canal. And this is in Nagar Karnool district. Moving on to Tamil Nadu, AIADMK Chief Edapadi Palanisamy meets Amit Shah, and this has of course started off the entire alliance speculation. Now they're looking to revive the alliance between BJP and ADMK ahead of the 2026 Tamil Nadu elections. Dhanya, will this finally happen? We all thought it will, and it was only a matter of time. But isn't the question about who'll get what, who'll have the upper hand in this alliance?
I'm actually quite surprised that this meeting took place now because we were thinking that when the election approaches, which is 2026, the AIADMK will play tough. I mean, they do have a choice now of going with Vijay's party, which is TVK. But surprisingly, they have gone to Amit Shah. And I wonder if Annamalai has been kept in the loop because it was Annamalai who created the trouble, which led to the alliance splitting, right? So I wonder if he has been kept in the loop that this meeting is happening itself. But if the alliance does come through, then we are going to see the old formation back. DMK and allies, AIADMK and allies.
Yeah, and I think it's also indicative that Annamalai doesn't have the kind of power that he used to because he was firmly against the alliance. He's made that very, very clear. So this could also mean that he doesn't have that kind of grip on the high command that he used to before. Moving to Karnataka, chaos in parliament over Karnataka Muslim quota. BJP says Congress is dividing India. Pot kettle black, like I said before. But this particular move, I am not in complete agreement with. The Karnataka State Cabinet had approved an amendment to the Karnataka Transparency in Public Procurement. That's the KTPP Act, which aims to provide a 4% reservation in tenders to minority contractors. I'm not sure if you need to, stretch the reservation argument even to tenders. That is a huge mess in Karnataka, especially in the BBMP level. Do we need to add another layer to that? I don't know. But also the fact that, there have been calls for boycott, economic boycott of minorities, especially Muslims. Maybe in that backdrop, it might make sense. What do you think, Dhanya?
No, but see, in a lot of states, like for example in Telangana, when KCR was the chief minister, the whole argument, the whole complaint was that a certain community was getting all the contracts, right? So I don't know. I mean, if there is a section which is hogging all the contracts, and why not give reservation? I think the whole problem here is a lack of communication. The Congress is not able to communicate convincingly as to why is this reservation been introduced, and what do they aim with it, right? So now they've just left it for the media to rip it apart. I feel the lack of communication is more problematic than the decision taken itself. You have any thoughts?
But I was also wondering if with some of these policies that's been a bit of a pattern, because I was thinking about the hijab ban, right? And the Congress came to power soon after we saw so many Muslim women students being targeted unfairly by, at that time, a lot of BJP representatives as well. And it's been a few years. And I feel like in that case, for example, you've heard them give a lot of lip service to the idea that they're going to reverse that ban, but you haven't actually seen them effectively implement it. And so even the lack of communication that you're talking about here, or just inconsistent and ineffective communication, feels to me like it's also a part of a larger pattern where they say that they're going to advocate for the rights of a marginalized community, but you don't see it, sort of translate into policy reality as effectively often. Or here where it is
just a very classic Congress.
Yeah. Or here where it is happening, you don't see them putting their weight behind it as they should.
Yeah. No, they're putting their weight behind, but they're not able to explain it basically.
Yeah, that's at the beginning of this term in 2023, we did see Congress make more effort. They were more communicative, but now they've fallen back on their old ways. UP Chief Minister Adityanath targets MK Stalin on 3-language policy, labeling it politically motivated and advocating for linguistic unity. Basically, decode this, say all of you speak in Hindi, we'll all be united. Do not stand up for your own language. And in connection to this, Tamil Nadu Chief Minister MK Stalin reaffirms commitment to the 2-language policy. So this deadlock continues. In Kerala, Rajiv Chandrasekhar has been appointed the BJP Kerala chief, and he said that it will be development-driven politics in the state. But many think that, and this is from people from his own camp, he thinks it's a demotion because he was a union minister. Now he's been made to lead a party in a state where they don't have a great deal of prospects, right? It's very difficult.
It was interesting because the TNM's newsletter on this, explaining what is happening behind the scenes, called this an interesting development in Kerala politics. I think it is a very, it shows a very unfortunate development that Kerala BJP doesn't know what to do with itself. Among its most famous faces in Kerala, who has some kind of connect among its cadre, but it's all split and fighting between them. And Rajiv, I don't think is a person who has ever wanted to have any place for himself in the Kerala politics. He was strongly rooting for being in the central government, and the powers that be are showing him that he doesn't have a place there, whereas he was not even given a Rajya Sabha seat, but he's demoted to put in charge of the Kerala BJP. And the Kerala BJP is a completely different animal because with a majority of minority populations, Christians and Muslims, it can't do its hate politics. It doesn't have a leader so far who connects with, mobilizes people into the party. So it's having a tough time. And Rajiv, I recently saw a video where he's trying to talk about himself in Malayalam to a crowd, and it was hilarious, the video. He couldn't even talk properly. And I don't think the vote bank of Kerala connects to people who are so dissociated. And well, you could show that Tharoor is an example that he has been all over the world and he has come back, and made a vote bank for himself there. But Tharoor appeals to a different kind of audience, that English speaking, that kind of an audience that Kerala, especially that Trivandrum has. Tharoor has his appeal there, but I don't think Rajiv Chandrasekhar would ever have that kind of an appeal.
Yeah, but I mean, he's been here in Bengaluru for a long time. They tried to also push him in Karnataka, and that was met with a lot of resistance. But to your point of, Rajiv Chandrasekhar not having that appeal, I thought he performed quite well, right, Dhanya? And he was quite a threat to Tharoor in the Trivandrum seat.
No, he did perform, but listen, I just realized one thing. Sitting in studio is Nikita Saxena, who's done the longest ever profile of Rajiv Chandrasekhar for the Caravan. Please do go back and read that profile. It's about Rajiv Chandrasekhar, the businessman also, not the politician actually.
Also the politician.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing that I was remembering just now is the title of that piece is No Land's Man. Because I think, and this piece was published in 2017 in the media issue of the Caravan, but I think almost half a decade later, it really just feels like, when I was speaking to people in Karnataka, they really didn't feel keen to have Rajiv be a part of the BJP there. And in Kerala, there was outright dismissal and contempt for him amongst people from his own party who didn't feel like he had ideological clarity, who didn't feel like Pooja and Leena pointing out that he had any connection to the state or had electoral prospects at that point for that matter. Of course, that's changed a little bit with the last Lok Sabha election, but I feel like in that way, he keeps sort of trying to carve his space and you haven't really seen him settle anywhere still. So...
Yeah, but the running joke is the channel which he owns, Asianet, put out an exclusive interview with him. How difficult it must have been to get that interview, right? Okay. Pooja, are we done with the headlines?
We have one last headline, and Supreme Court stays Allahabad High Court's ruling on sexual assault definition. This is after, a comment was made, a ruling was made that grabbing breasts and breaking pajama string is inadequate to charge for rape or attempt to rape. That has been stayed.
Okay, so we are done with the headlines and we have our guest joining from the Bengaluru studio. Welcome to Alok Prasanna. Alok is a co-founder and lead of Vidhi Karnataka. He's a lawyer whose areas of research include judicial reforms, constitutional law, urban development and law. Thank you for coming to the studio, Alok.
My pleasure, Dhanya.
Okay, so before we go to the topic, to all the audience out there, that we had started a project called Spirituality Business. The first story will be out on Friday. Then next Monday, next Friday, we have lots of stories coming up. The first one is on the first one is on Isha Foundation and the second one is on Orwell. So do read those stories and thank you to all those who contributed. To others who haven't, you still have time. Click on that link, make a contribution because our reporters have to travel for these stories. They have to stay back and then file all this. So we need your help. Do click on the link and make a contribution to the series called Spirituality Business. So since everyone's in the studio, we'll go to the topic now. Kunal Kamra. There's no way that we couldn't have discussed what's happening with Kunal Kamra. The man did a show. He uploaded it 2 months later and now he's facing threats. He's facing a police case. But I feel this has been a little more dangerous than previous instances, considering that it did not stop at just vandalism. You saw the BMC going and demolishing a part of the building where Kunal Kamra actually performed. That means that we've always known that vandalism is either party-sponsored or state-sponsored, but now the state directly is sponsoring this kind of a reprimand, right? The BMC going
also
and demolishing.
Also the fact that you can see police officials in some of the videos and it's not really very clear what their role is. And this is echoes of, previous acts of even more serious violence that we've seen in Delhi in universities, where one is the fact that you have people who are publicly identifying themselves with the ruling party. The second is that you seem to have a state machinery that's just bystanders, basically.
Alok, did you watch Kunal's show? What did you think of it?
I watched the whole thing and I wouldn't say necessarily, if purely judged on the humor aspect of it, it's his funniest. But I'd say in terms of the jabs that he was able to land, I think the impact tells you, the reaction tells you the impact that the show has had. And I mean, let's just get the elephant out of the room. There's nothing criminal or there's nothing in that show which necessitates any criminal action. But to go back to the point that you last mentioned, I think it's a real test now for the courts because they've laid down the guidelines last year on these kinds of so-called bulldozer action. And are they going to be able to enforce their guidelines? Because on the face of it, there was one which recently took place in Nagpur in the context of the so-called Aurangzeb tomb riots. This action by the BMC is also quite clearly illegal. Will the courts stand up and say this is clear contempt of court? And it's not enough for them to say it's contempt of court. Are they going to impose consequences? Is somebody going to go to jail for this? And that's what the courts can do in the power of contempt. They can send officers to jail. They've said we can even impose damages and make the officer paid out of his pocket for these kinds of damages. So this is where, this is a test of the court's guidelines laid down last year. We see that the Supreme Court has been doing this to a certain extent in some cases here and there. But now it's a test for the Bombay High Court. If the hotel owners or the studio owners go to the Bombay High Court, how quickly will the Bombay High Court ensure that justice is done? I think that's the true test of this.
Dhanya, I just want to add that, BMC is notorious for this. This is not the first time they've actually done something of the sort. Kangana Ranaut had criticized the then government and they'd gone and demolished a part of a bungalow. RJ Malishka had said something and then she faced a mosquito breeding notice because she criticized BMC for potholes across Mumbai. And then Kapil Sharma had also tweeted something about, officials asking him for bribe and they sent him a demolition notice in 2016. So BMC is notorious for this. The second point I want to make is there is a context. I just want to frame the political context to this tragic comedy that's playing out in Mumbai. Just last month in a press conference, Eknath Shinde had in Marathi announced that, I am an ordinary Karyakarta of Shiv Sena, but please don't forget that I am Bala Saheb Thakre's Shiv Sena. I am a follower. What he was trying to say is I now represent that aggressive street politics that Bala Saheb was famous for, notorious for, depending on where you're looking at it. Because now in Maharashtra politics, Uddhav Thackeray and his son Aditya Thackeray, they kind of represent a softer, more sane face of Shiv Sena. Although there have been some incidents here and there where they have gone after some people, but otherwise we no longer see the kind of politics that we saw when Bal Thackeray was alive, right? No digging up of pitches ahead of India-Pakistan matches, no threatening Pakistani singers, or even other kind of vandalism that we saw playing out. So what Shinde is essentially doing is, because now he's been relegated as the deputy chief minister, his reputation, his image has taken a dent within his own party and his followers, from chief minister to DCM. And let's not forget the BMC elections are going to be held very soon. So this is a consolidation of support, trying to prove himself, and it's a matter of survival for him, which is why we saw the kind of aggression. Because calling him a Gaddar is almost accepted. It's a norm. Literally every other person in Shiv Sena, the UBT faction, have called him. All opposition leaders, including Ajit Pawar, by the way, who's now a party colleague of his, a cabinet colleague of his, have called him Gaddar. So in the assembly. So it is very mild. Last point I want to make, I thought the two songs, both one supposed to be on Eknath Shinde and the other one on Adarniya Modi ji, we don't want the studio demolished. I thought both of them were quite funny, although Kunal Kamra can't sing, but that's not his day job, so it's fine. But I thought they were very well written.
Yeah, I quite liked the, whatever bits I saw of his performance this time. It really measured up to political comedy satire, political satire. And I think this is Shinde trying to stay, relevant and showing that he's the true inheritor of the Thackeray politics and, asserting himself, getting the cadre together to push that narrative forward and all of that in the light of in the background of a comedy show.
Okay, I just want to play out my favorite part of this whole show.
हम होंगे कंगाल, हम होंगे कंगाल, हम होंगे कंगाल एक दिन.
In fact, I listened to this, then I went back to the original song, listened to that many times.
I really liked Tanshaha also. I do feel like he's sort of he's not holding back his punches. You may not find it hilarious. And also, even after the vandalism took place, I love that the notice he put out, it's still sort of, he's able to maintain his levity, when he says, I'm happy to perform at any structure that means demolishing, or he kind of tries to make a case for why habitat should not be attacked. It's very rare to see someone who's been targeted in this way. And Kunal Kamra, I think, to give him credit, has done this in the past as well, right? Like, I remember in Shaheen Bagh, which now feels like another era, he had come to perform. And, he was, of course, getting a lot of laughs. And I remember he ended, and this is 2020, just before COVID, he ended with saying, "Aap chronology samjhaiye," which, of course, had gone viral at that time. And he says to this huge crowd, पहले आया हरेन पांड्या, फिर आया सोराबुद्दीन, और फिर आया लोया. And, there was rousing applause, and we were all kind of surprised. So I feel like that's also been a pattern with him. He may be funny sometimes and not, but it's interesting to see that there is an artist.
I also want to remind everyone of Kamra doing the Arnab Goswami thing on a plane, I thought that is the most bravest moment in comedy, where you turn the a public transport where you are all sort of stuck without a way out, and then turn it into a performance of a lifetime. I remember looking at it and thinking that was one of the bravest political satire performance that I've seen in recent times, and that shows a certain kind of spine.
I found it
that
a bit on the nose, but yeah.
No, I do not agree with that at all. Imagine being in a flight and then somebody just puts their camera on your face and ask questions. I want to ask.
But I have no sympathy. Having been on the other end, I must say I'd have no sympathy. He deserved it every bit. I just wish that Kamra could have come up with better lines, because after a point it became very repetitive. But that said, Dhanya, but for me, what was funnier than these songs was the audio clip.
Yes, it was so good. It was so good.
Bhai, abhi hum Tamil Nadu kaise aayenge?
Yes.
I mean, you want to go beat up the guy and you're asking him, how can I come to Tamil Nadu? I thought that was more hilarious than the stand-up in itself.
No, but Alok, what I want to ask you is that, though of course we're making light of the whole situation, imagine if Kunal Kamra wants to come back to Bombay at some point of time and do...
He has to, right? Because he's been summoned by the police now.
No, I'm saying to do another show, for example, it has become so dangerous, right? And that is depriving him of his livelihood in one way. So how have we reached this point where violence is just resorted to immediately when there's disagreement?
It's not disagreement. I want to frame this in a slightly different way. And I think it kind of helps to look at it from a longer history. And the longer history is that we've inherited a police force which believes its job is to follow its master's orders, not the law, right? They may say whatever they want to in public domain, but everybody knows the way the police force is structured, the way it functions, the way it carries out its duties. It is to preserve the regime. This was what the colonial authority set up the police force for. All this rule of law was to convince certain Indians that to be okay with all of this. Somehow, in the 70 years post-independence, we never got around to changing this. Successive governments thought, I'll use it for my purposes. Let's see how bad could it get. I'm sure somebody else will figure it out. Somebody else will figure it out. Until we've now accepted that basically this is how police will function, right? See the reaction from even people who make hate speech and stuff like that, right? Almost no one is expecting the police to follow the law or anything. Everyone is like, just arrest them, be done with it. And bail is seen as acquittal for some reason. So you have a criminal justice system, not just the police, entirely colonial, whose purpose is to serve the ruling regime. And this is what the ruling regime wants to use it for today, right? In the past, perhaps people were more secure about their power. They didn't need to worry about comedians. They didn't need to worry about people making jokes. But maybe now they're less secure about their power. Now they worry more about how they're being perceived. And social media has taken things 100x. Kunal Kamra performed before 100 people. I know that Master Hirannaya, a very famous comedian here in Karnataka, used to perform to sell out crowds during the emergency, brutally mocking Indira Gandhi. I mean, I've seen one of his performances in the late 90s. It still didn't carry that sting because all of this had gone out. But I thought back and I was like, this guy was doing it during the height of emergency and no one dared touch him, right? Everyone was like, it was a Congress-ruled state. Karnataka was a Congress-ruled state. every CM has been at the receiving end of Hiranya's brand of political comedy, which quite frankly makes Kunal Kamra look tame.
Yeah.
Right?
His words were stinging.
His words
he did
were
not hold
stinging.
back.
He did.
Profanity even.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. And I always say, it's probably the regional language or the local language comedians who do political comedy way better. But I think what we are seeing is a confluence of two things. One is you're seeing the colonial police state being used much more aggressively. And you're also seeing the internet hypercharge certain things, which might otherwise not been that big a deal. Yeah, sure. It would be funny. People would laugh. Somebody would grumble about it. But when you reach an audience of, last I checked, was 6.5 million people, not counting other social media, not counting the people who may have seen it on WhatsApp, not counting the people who may have watched 2-3 clips and gone, this is hilarious, right? So we are at that particular stage where both these processes are interacting, and we are left in this absurd situation where the leading news out of India is state government chief minister picks a fight with comedian over jokes.
Yeah. Dhanya, for me, this represents something a bit more than Kunal Kamra, right? Whether you find him funny, whether you find him annoying. I know a lot of people don't agree with him. They find him very, annoying and all of that. But the fact is that he represents something. And that's what mattered to me when he did heckling, for a lack of better term, when he heckled Arnab Goswami on that flight. It wasn't that it was very funny or he did it well, but it is something that he's daring to stand up and do. And that I think is precious in this country today. Look at the reactions. This Shiv Sena MP, his name is Dhairyasheel Mane. Using this incident, he's called Kunal Kamra a joker in Parliament, and he's demanding rules for content regulation and a ban on platforms promoting hate speech. Brother, your entire party will have to go down. It is built on hate speech. Look at the irony. He is calling someone else a joker. So at least for that, I feel that we need to stand with Kunal Kamra, even though you may not laugh at his jokes.
Leena may remember when we were growing up, all the Malayalam channels used to have comedy shows in the evening where there will be people who will be dressed up as Karunakaran, Nayanar, or all the politicians, and they used to crack such horrible jokes about them. It was a daily show. In fact, one of Asianet's longest running shows called Munshi, which is a political satire. They make fun of all politicians. It's a mainstream program. I actually don't know if it's there anymore. And I feel intolerance is increasing more and more, and all governments are becoming autocratic in some way or the other. Last week we were discussing about the arrest of these 2 journalists in Telangana. Okay, you may disagree with their work, but the point is the chief minister didn't have to send police to the houses of these 2 women journalists at 5 in the morning and arrest them. In Tamil Nadu, just now we are seeing that a group of people live streamed an attack on this YouTuber called Savaka Shankar. They went into his house and put human feces inside. He has, of course, held the Congress responsible for it because he said he had exposed a contract, problems in a contract. And he has been a critic of the DMK too. So questions are being asked of everyone that you are sponsoring this kind of intolerance, right? You are okay with it because you are giving the same message.
Yeah. I mean, I think with Kunal Kamra, the other thing that's interesting to me, and maybe Alok can speak more about this, is when you think about his past comedic work, you also think about the role that the courts have played. For example, there was a point at which they were considering contempt proceedings against him, if you recall, when he had made some posts about the then Chief Justice Chandrachud with reference to the immediate granting of bail to Arnab Goswami in a case. And even there, I remember, I think in response to the contempt proceedings, he had sort of put out a seemingly facetious response, which was sort of making light of the proceedings. But what he had done instead is said that I would like for the time that would be taken up by my proceeding to instead be given to cases that are not getting the time of day in years. So this was abrogation, electoral bonds, so on and so forth. And so I feel like the vigilante sort of actions right now are particularly horrific because you can also see what's happening to the venue. But in general, the sort of hypocrisy that we've been seeing in terms of every level of, the sort of democratic machinery having a very low threshold for what is considered offensive.
Very low threshold.
Yes.
Alok, you want to add something to what Nikita was saying?
In the context of the judiciary, I feel it's kind of mixed, and it's very dependent on the individual personality of the judge. There will be judges who might laugh off being mocked this way. There might be judges who will react badly to a joke made about somebody else. And it's in some ways, because judges are also drawn from the same society as politicians at the end of the day, you are giving them a lot of unaccountable power at the end of the day. They are going to react in this way because they think it's seemingly acceptable. It's, again, maybe a sociologist would be in a better position to comment on this. But something about power relations in this country is changing. People with power feel a lot more insecure. To me, all of this is a sign of power being insecure at some point, right? That you can't exactly make a clear claim that my power is legitimate. So which is where I think somewhere deeper we need to interrogate that. And it's not just about institutions specifically, right? You may say that we're all democratic institutions, we all get elected by people in power, but somehow on a day-to-day basis, the legitimacy of that power, what it is being used for, is what is being questioned by actions like this. And that our politicians, our bureaucrats, our judges, our police are unable to answer the people in an effective way. So they have to resort to this kind of brute force shutting down of criticism and so on. And I mean, just to add one more last thread to this, and I was just reading this, that the film Santosh, which was the UK's nominee for the best foreign film in the Oscars, has been effectively banned in India by the censor board. Even though the censor board has no power to ban any films, they've just demanded such cuts that you might as well not show the film. Right? Now, again, and the reasons are ridiculous. They're like, oh, you're showing police brutality. Oh, you're showing bad things happening in India. Like, Visaranai did every such thing and better 15 years ago. What could Santosh possibly show that Visaranai did not, right? And in some senses, it comes from that same impulse that what this is really doing, and this adds more credit to the creators. Even though they may not have intended it, something about their art, something about their work has shaken power so much, has shaken people in power so much that they're forced to react in this aggressive way.
No, I think one thing that might lend into this argument is that in earlier times, politics was always said that, you win this fight on the street, right? It was always at the end, where do you get your votes? And it is what kind of narrative you establish on the street. But today, it's like what kind of narrative you establish on social media. That big theater has what is rattled, I think. And earlier, there was a sort of caste and class and all of that mildly washed under the rug, kept under the rug. And today it's all out. There are people on social media questioning you. There are Dalit voices. There are gender voices. There are multiple kind of things that you have to firefight in a day, and before a very big audience. And you never know how this is going to land, or how something is blown out of proportion. Something that should have rattled everyone is sometimes swept under the rug. So all these things happen at the same time. And it's like, what stupid thing that you can put the mainstream attention to and just get away with the rest. So take the most idiotic thing and make a political spectrum out of it, and get everyone running behind it, so that other important issues get very little attention, or no attention at all.
But all of this is a distraction, right? We can't take away from that. This is all just distraction. It's to keep us all busy so that we don't look at the real issues. What's happening in Nagpur is a travesty. People who are accused of rioting, their houses are being bulldozed. And this is Fadnavis's hometown. He's the home minister. This is what he's doing. And right under his nose, they've demolished a studio. So it's to keep us busy, and the mainstream media is complicit. In fact, they're enablers. They happily participate in the charade, which is why you should become subscribers of the News Minute and News Laundry, because we do not get distracted. We are discussing it today for a larger message, but we keep our attention where it's needed.
So quickly, one or two things, because we spoke about courts, and since we shouldn't get distracted fully, I was interviewing Professor Mohan Gopal a few days ago. In fact, he was pointing out that if we truly believe in freedom of expression, we have to also do something about the contempt of court law. That you have this law, which is like a sword hanging over your head all the time, which is the reason why people cannot, criticize judges, question judgments. Even we have been talking a lot about judicial reforms even during this one. And one story which everyone's talking about is Justice Verma, right? How was there money which was seized from his house or not? And I was thinking how the whole reporting around that has been so careful because of this fear of contempt of court in one way. But Alok, what is your opinion when we speak about freedom of expression? Should we also look at the contempt of court law?
Yes, of course. I think Contempt of Courts Act and the way it's invoked is one of the bigger issues why not enough issues of judicial corruption get talked about. We remember Madhu Trehan getting into trouble for a survey that they published in the magazine about corruption in the Delhi High Court. And I can speak from personal experience here because in Vidhi, we had commissioned a survey of lawyers across 8 high courts in India. And the questions ranged everything from like gender representation, what do you think about the quality of judgments, do you get a fair hearing, and so on. But 2 questions which we knew are going to cause concern, we had to run it by 2 very eminent judges, retired judges of this country. And these were judges who understood exactly where we're coming from, who fully appreciated the research, who said nobody's done work like this, but they said for your own sake, don't publish it. Right? This was a perception, right? This was a perception. We had gone across, conducted the surveys. The questions were on corruption and on caste. And the judges said, you're taking too much of a chance here, right? And they had our best interests at heart. It's not like they were trying to protect their brethren. It's not like they denied that there are issues of corruption or caste, but they said, you are taking a chance that tomorrow none of this research will have the impact as much as saying you, the people who work at Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, are now being hauled up for contempt of court. There is an intolerance within the judiciary to have this kind of open discussion about issues which bizarrely, there are open discussions in the bar canteen. If you want to find out about the integrity of any judge, I make this joke that the intelligence bureau whose reports the judges are supposed to receive when they make nominations for judges are not as useful as just listening to gossip in the bar canteen. There may be some exaggerations here and there, but by and large, the bar knows. The bar knows who is amenable, who is not, who is on the take, who is not, who is very strict, who is very honest, who is very upright. So I think these conversations which are happening in closed rooms kind of needs to come out, kind of needs to be there. And that is what I think, when it doesn't happen, when something like this Justice Verma's incident comes out into the public, even as carefully as the media houses are reporting it, which is fair because we don't know a lot of things about it. If you see some of the more well thought out reports, there are a lot of questions that are still unanswered about the affair, and that doesn't mean nothing should be done. I think the Supreme Court has taken the right course of action, making as many things as transparent as possible, putting all the information out there, conducting a proper inquiry. They've appointed 3 judges who I think everyone can agree are very honest, very upright, very efficient, who will undertake a very impartial inquiry into the matter. But the fact is, when something like this happens, people are going to gossip. Social media is rife with it. Forget social media, drawing rooms in Delhi and across the country are rife with it. Everybody will point to this order, he passed this order in this case. They'll be like, that order, this happened, that happened. And then beyond a point, it's not going to be limited to Justice Verma. It is going to raise questions. And there have recently been articles listing out the recent massive corruption scandals that have taken place in the higher judiciary. And, I can speak of this from living memory, that I distinctly remember it's mildly hilarious but also tragic when the wrong judge received the bribe. Nirmal Yadav, Nirmal Jeet Kaur thing. And it was such a shock. It was like somebody's openly giving cash to one of the judges, and the only reason they got caught was because it went to the house of the wrong judge who was upright and who immediately called the cops and who, ensured action was taken. But here's the thing. The trial against Justice Nirmal Yadav isn't complete. It's been almost 15 years.
And she retired.
As
the High Court of another judge.
As a judge of another High Court, right? The most famous case and the one which sort of led to the current law as it stands is Justice K. Veeraswamy, who was Chief Justice of the Madras High Court. In the 1970s, he had to basically step back from judicial duties in his last 1 month as Chief Justice because there was massive corruption allegation made against him, owning disproportionate assets. Never convicted. 23 years later, his case did not conclude. So there is this problem which is of course affects the larger system, the criminal justice system. We can't even convict politicians or bureaucrats at that high level. So forget about judges. But the fact is, when the discourse doesn't take place, when the debate doesn't happen about the fact that there are so many opportunities for corruption in the judiciary. How are you vetting the integrity of the candidate? How are you keeping track that the work that they're doing is legal, is sound? I think people will talk about it. And when something like this happens, the voice is only going to get louder. They're not going to go quieter just because Supreme Court is doing the right thing in, inquiring into him.
The also problem is the lack of transparency, right? We talk about judges being held in a certain, esteem, but everything is opaque, and any attempts being made to bring any semblance of transparency is met with so much resistance. For example, the 2010 bill that was introduced, it was during the Veerappa Moily time, asking for judicial accountability. It was defeated in Rajya Sabha. Finally, it lapsed in 2014. And let's look at what the bill was asking for. It wanted a formal mechanism to hold High Court and Supreme Court judges accountable, something that's not there in India. And it wanted to promote transparency, enforce ethical conduct, because right now when you say ethics, it's such a subjective word. We spoke about the Allahabad High Court judge who spoke about majoritarianism. What has happened? Is that objectionable? Is it not? It depends on the CJI of that High Court or the Supreme Court. If they decide it's not, then there's not anything anybody else can do. This bill also spoke about how any citizen should be allowed to file complaints against judge. And it also asked for mandatory asset declaration by judges, including spouse and dependents. If this was allowed to pass, maybe at least some of the problems that we face could perhaps be rectified. The standing committee looked at it, it gave 100 plus recommendations, and then it was defeated in Rajya Sabha, and that is the last we heard of it. There hasn't been any other such attempt. The lack of a formal framework is what I think is a problem. Now everything is subjective, and it's like sitting in judgment of one of your own kind, and it's all very, it's between themselves, and nobody has a say in it at all.
It is, to use a word which I used in the context of the previous discussion, colonial. Right? Because what was our idea of the judiciary? Our idea of the judiciary today comes from our colonial heritage. It is that you appointed white men, and mostly they were white men, to run the judiciary of this country. Occasionally you let a few non-white people also into it, but you didn't trust them, so you didn't give them very high positions. Initially, there are a few Indian High Court judges who start coming into the picture, but some of the better known ones end up picking fights with the majority English judiciary and leave. So you have a system which was essentially designed for white men to rule unquestioned. And we've continued that, right? Except in the system that we have now introduced in the context of impeachment, which is also very hard, which was never really intended to be used on a regular basis, which you can't. It has to be something fairly serious, right? On the more regular kind of holding them accountable doesn't happen. And to me, it's the most bizarre thing that the same judiciary which said that, candidates for Lok Sabha and Assembly elections should declare all their assets has in public, not just declare to someone, declare in public, has so vigorously resisted making assets declarations public. There was a brief while when the Supreme Court judges were putting out their assets in public domain. It stopped because you had certain senior advocates who were made judges of the Supreme Court, and they balked at the idea of actually telling people how much they earn, or they earned when they were lawyers, right? And as a result, it stopped. So the Supreme Court only has some past records of judges who have all long since retired. Although it's claimed that the declarations are being made to the Chief Justice, but what's the use? It's only the general public who are like, how did that person make so much money? Like, if somebody is a well-known senior advocate, thriving practice before they became a High Court judge or Supreme Court judge, nobody has a second doubt, right? We know how lawyers charge. But somebody who suddenly goes from having 1 or 2 crores and suddenly now has 100 crores 10 years into the judicial practice, it's a question of clear disproportionate assets. And a lot of times people are able to point out the kinds of Bidami transactions that, hey, this judge was seen handling this property, but it's not in their name. What the hell is going on? These are the kinds of stuff that comes out in the public as part of the process. And somehow there is a great, almost colonial mentality about, if we involve the public, we can't trust the natives. They'll all make these false complaints. Yes, I think there is a point about not maybe opening it to make everyone complain, because the most complainants will be disgruntled litigants. And it's disgruntled litigants who don't understand the legal procedure either because their lawyers have misinformed them or they're so convinced that they're right. The only way that the case could have gone against them is because the judge is corrupt. That will overwhelm the system. What will happen is you will have endless complaints about I lost this case can only be because the judge is corrupt, as opposed to verifiable material which says so that kind of robustness needs to be there. We should allow people to make complaints, but there needs to be a kind of robust mechanism which says how do we ensure that this system of ensuring accountability doesn't get overwhelmed by just disgruntled litigants.
You were mentioning journalism on legal proceedings. There's a piece that I really like in The Caravan by Atul, who was, covering courts, where he sort of talks about judicial reporting being divided as the before Keher time and the after Gogoi time, because even in the past few years, I do feel like, post T.S. Thakur, who was the CJI, maybe in 2014, around that time, starting from Justice Keher, you've had a corruption allegation there. You remember there was that infamous letter, by a former chief minister, if I remember correctly, which named Justice Keher's sons, if I'm not wrong, but essentially there were serious allegations of bribery. So you saw some whispers of it, you saw some reporting on it. Then came Justice Deepak Mishra, and that was, that's when everything, all hell broke loose, right? Because you had, you had Supreme Court justices who on their own sort of opened the Pandora's box when they decided to hold
the press
conference.
Yeah.
And so everybody was reporting on what was going on. It kind of comes back, I think, I can see that there is a connection to this that is, of course, colonial, but I think it's also very much about a higher judiciary at almost every level, and perhaps Leena will know more about this in terms of like hard research. We also have Justice Suryakant, who's going to be taking over as Chief Justice in November, if I'm not wrong. And there are actually, and this could be a disgruntled complainant. The problem is that we don't know what the inquiry said. We don't know whether this is it. And disgruntled complainants can also make legitimate complaints. I don't think that means that their complaint itself is not, does not have facts. So he has been accused of, I think, undervaluing properties to the tune of several crores. He has also been accused of taking money for bails in cases of narcotics in Punjab, which has a very, very serious drug issue.
I just want to add something before we ask Leena. Whenever, such stories happen, I keep thinking, haven't I reported about a judge getting money? And then I go back to my old stories and I realize, oh yeah, the Andhra Pradesh judge Pattabhi Rao was arrested with because Gali Janardhan Reddy apparently gave money for bail. Then there was another judge in Tamil Nadu who said that he got calls for giving bail to a minister. There was another judge in Andhra Pradesh itself who said he was offered some 40 crores to give Janardhan Reddy again bail, but the case had come up to another judge, which is Pattabhi Rao. And I was wondering what happened to all these cases. There was even a ACB inquiry against Pattabhi Rao, but it's
we
almost
don't know what has happened.
I mean, Alok has listed out so many cases which 23 years, 15 years, he gave these fantastical numbers about how the cases never end. How do people trust, right? In one way, I think the CJI did a good thing by opening up the documents. Like anybody can go to the Supreme Court website and download the report which has been given by the Delhi Police Chief and by this committee to the CJI. So everybody can read. Some portions are redacted. And even Justice Verma's reply saying that the shed apparently where the burnt money was found, that he was saying it was open all the time and that his family was not in charge of it. He said somebody could have even kept the money there. I'm not sure. Even that reply is there. So in one way, I think this case has opened up some transparency. The CJI Sanjeev Khanna has ensured that. But will it stop with that? Yeah, Pooja.
No, just before I hand it to Leena, I just wanted to say that, there is I feel as public, we don't have any trust that anything can happen. I remember when I was a young reporter, I used to go to court. We were so scared of judges. Once in a packed room, I could not put my foot down. I was standing on one foot. And the judge just looked at me and said, I'll book you for contempt of court. Put your feet down and stand. It's disrespectful. I said, I'm not doing it to disrespect you. I don't have place to stand. But they said, you're arguing with me. and even now I'm scared to even, reveal more, because you're like, and we have, Dhanya, you and I have seen a woman reporter being put in jail because she was chewing gum in court. We've seen such frivolous things happening. And in case of Justice Nirmal Yadav, 17 long years, and nothing has happened. The case is getting dragged on. She got transferred from one high court and to the other. I think Uttarakhand High Court is where she retired from. And she's lived her full life. So, Leena, I mean, give us some hope. You're usually in charge of morale around here.
I did have one question for Leena. I mean, if you'd like to weigh in on that, because I saw that Prashant Bhushan has been sort of sounding caution about how this case might be used to justify government overreach in appointments. Is that something that you're sort of hearing about or looking at all? Because I mean, it would be interesting to know more about that as well.
No, one thing is last South Central episode where we're discussing about whether the kind of media that we were discussing is yellow journalism or stands up to the standards of what is expected out of media. We said this, that the government will use these kind of instances to put certain control, certain, clamp down on media and how it conducts itself. So there is always this fear that whatever gap that you give, the government will get in there, the state will get in there and try to regulate it in favor of them. But having come back to some of the discussions that we have already had in my last job, where I was heading a legal journalism platform that exclusively looked at Supreme Court of India and reporting from there. I was many times warned that, that Leena, this is okay. If you're doing this story against a politician, this is okay. Whereas it's sometimes very seemingly harmless reporting, not even very hard-hitting investigations. But I was over and over again warned that judges have a thin skin, don't do this, don't ask questions, don't do reporting. And I was very proud of the Caravan newsroom when I was part of it, and later when Vinod was heading these kind of big judicial cover stories, which was a breath of fresh air, because nobody was had the courage and amount of legal reads that we had to do to see each line was framed correctly, that if there were multiple lawyers sitting on each draft before it went out, to see that, okay, this will stand in a court of law. And it's great that none of those Caravan cover stories had to be redacted or pulled out because of the kind of legal vetting Caravan did under Vinod when he was editing it, to put these kind of stories forward, even if it's the Judge Loya case, even if it's Gogoi's case, where he sat on a case, he sat in the jury and decided that he did no wrong. And there was Loya's case, which was very heartbreaking, to say the judiciary refused to stand up for a brother of its own, right? To say that let's at least order an investigation into this before we close it. That refusal, when that big a story came, shows what is spineless. So when Alok, you say that, they inherited a colonial mindset. Yes, they inherited a colonial setup. They inherited a colonial law and a system. But in a lifetime has passed since then. And if you look at all the first Supreme Court of India, Indians who have been on the bench, these are all wealthy divans and with palaces of their own, with, and that caste oligarchy, to borrow from the term that Professor Mohan Gopal keeps using. And I was moderating a conversation last December at the Wayanad Literature Festival, where we had Justice Chalmeshwar, Professor Mohan Gopal, and we had Advocate Shyam Diwan. And one thing that they all said is that this is the biggest dispenser of justice in this country, and why don't we have a professional system of vetting, a performance appraisal, a system of appointing them? Where is that? Why is that not possible? And that is because this caste oligarchy puts a stop to that, and they don't want any kind of reforms to come in, and they themselves bulldoze it, and they see, and there is always this tussle between when will state get in and regulate us, right?
No, like Alok was saying, there are so many stories that you hear, right? And you can only classify them as stories because they never actually become reporting pieces. When I was in Times Now, I remember they put a wrong picture of a judge. It was some Kolkata judge. They put a wrong picture and there was a huge litigation. The judge asked for crores. After that, for years, we were told not to do any story to do with judges. Forget judges. Judgments itself, they didn't want to put judges' face. So that's the kind of fear that we are facing. I think this Justice Verma's case is one of the few examples where we have seen all mainstream media sort of reporting it well.
I think in this Justice Verma case, we have to go back and congratulate the CJI Sanjeev Khanna, because this is unprecedented. The way he has put out Justice Verma's response, the Chief Justice of Delhi High Court's report on this, and the videos out. This is unprecedented, and I really want to say that what he has done is great for judiciary, at least by letting the judiciary put out the facts there in front of the public. Some kind of reclaiming that moral high ground that it has. There's something at least that it's trying to do right, I feel, and should be congratulated for that move. Yeah. Then.
Okay, so we've touched upon a lot of ground today. Kunal Kamra, Justice Verma, CJ Sanjeev Khanna. I actually brought Nikita to the studio because I also wanted to talk about the story that we published on Monday.
I thought it was because you like my face.
That too. But then primarily because she edited the story. It's called the Kiran Bedi tapes. I did introduce a story in the beginning of the show. A lot of people, even in comments to us, have asked why do the story after so many years. That's because there are two important things. One is the story shows how the police resources are being misused. Here, Kiran Bedi herself has said that, yes, I was a concerned mother. Therefore, when my daughter was trapped in a visa scam, I told the police to tap her phones and that of her partners. But the most important part, which is, I think, getting lost in all the din, is that the story basically is about Kiran Bedi telling her friends in the Delhi police to tap the phones of her daughter and her partner because she believed they were doing a visa racket. Now, while this tap is going on, there is a rape of a Swiss diplomat in Delhi, and there is a conversation about this rape in those calls. Was the lead of that passed on to the investigator? No. Around 10,000 people were questioned for that rape. I mean, it was one of the biggest manhunts in Delhi. Nobody was arrested for that rape. Could this have been that lead? We do not know, because the cop who investigated, his name is Rajendran Singh, he said that he was not given any lead. So Kiran Bedi has been interviewed by multiple people after our story came out. The Times of India had a 5-column interview of Kiran Bedi where she's saying, I am a concerned mother. Any citizen can go and ask for, this kind of service. Like, I also want to tap a lot of people. I'm a very concerned citizen. It was her own daughter who was being trapped and her daughter was innocent. When Times of India asked her that the story also says there was a lead into a sexual assault, she's saying, I don't know about that. I just wanted my daughter tapped.
Actually, I mean, and her response, when I read it, especially in response to I'm just going to dial it back a little bit here, which is that Kiran Bedi wants you to think that this is a story about her being a good mother. That is the last thing that this story is about. I think parenthood is a very difficult job. I'm sure she was, I don't think the story at any point is trying to question how she is as a mother and to make it about that, to put tweet after tweet. And Kiran Bedi has not left any social media platform. She has been commenting under YouTube videos. She has been commenting on Instagram. She has been commenting on Twitter. She has even commented on Facebook. And I didn't think anyone except me still uses Facebook. But she has. But in none of these comments has she ever challenged any of the findings of the investigation. At no point has she said that I did not surveil my daughter. She has tried to tell us I was a concerned mother and I made a complaint. We asked her for a written copy of the complaint. We sent her a detailed questionnaire before the story was published.
Also, she's saying it's legitimate. Anybody can file such a complaint and the police will tap.
But she's also posted on Twitter today morning, or X, excerpts from a question answer that she's saying she did with Express, where she's claiming that any citizen can ask for this kind of surveillance operation. Now, the reporters have accessed hundreds of emails before they did this story. Some of these emails show instances in which Kiran Bedi is scolding senior Delhi police officials when she thinks that they're being lax in their surveillance. She is chastising them and she's telling them that a private agency is able to get me more information than you are. Essentially, that your surveillance is not good enough. I paraphrase. Will an ordinary citizen be able to do this? This is the fundamental question of the story, and there are two. can a police officer decide to wiretap the phones of two private citizens, in this case Kiran Bedi's daughter Saxena Bedi and the partner Gopal Suri, because she has decided that that is the step she needs to take as a concerned mother? Are there no checks in place? Are there no guardrails in place? Because if they're not, then that has very worrying implications for all of us.
And why was no case taken? We don't know. We do not know of any case filed or any FIR against the this Gopal, the man, and Sania, the Saxena. I don't know why I keep calling her Sania. I mean, after so many months, I still keep calling her Sania. Saxena. There is no case against either of them. Pooja, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to just also tell you people that it isn't just limited to Twitter, Facebook and all of that. WhatsApp is something that she's bombarding. I am somehow on her broadcast list and I'm getting a barrage of messages. Yesterday, she sent an appeal to all mothers and to society at large, where I take objection to one thing. She calls us a social media platform. No, we're not a social media platform. But again there, she talks about brazen contempt. They choose to mock the fact that I'm a mother in uniform. They publicly question my responsibility as a mother, especially during a moment when my daughter needed protection from a manipulative and dangerous man. You know, she's just sidestepping the entire issue of if you're a protective mother, which I presume a lot of them are. Most of our parents would have loved to get their hands, especially during our teenage days, on such a surveillance mechanism. But the fact is, just because you have concern doesn't give you the right to exploit an entire police system. That is not okay. And she's just sidestepping that.
I also want to point out here the 2013 Cobra Post investigation on the Saheb tapes, remember, of Amit Shah putting the entire Gujarat police to do surveillance on a Bangalore-based woman who the story was that Modi was interested in, and they put the whole entire, and they were called saying that, why are you not following her? And the explanation that came is that her father was concerned about her dating a Muslim youth and had requested the Gujarat police and the Gujarat Home Minister, and that's why they were doing this tapes and surveillance on her. So this has been like in India, this works. I think parental love that will push you to do surveillance on this kind of narrative works here, I guess.
We don't understand boundaries, I suppose.
What about the life and the dignity and the right to justice of the Swiss diplomat who dealt with a sexual assault? We don't know whether this lead might lead, whether or not this lead will result in the case being solved. What we know is that they seem to not have acted on a lead that they found at that time. And the lead was that Saxena Bedi's partner, Gopal Suri, is talking to a man and asking him, is there any doubt on you in this case or not? We don't know whether the police tried to find out who this man is, tried to find out what his connection to the case is. And I think for me, that's the part that's extreme. And she is not addressing that part.
In fact, we were discussing today that we should ask the Delhi police as to why are they not concerned, and if there was a lead into the sexual assault, shouldn't they be looking at it? So we were discussing that there are two possibilities, right? One is the Delhi police raids us. There's a complaint against us. Kiran Bedi is already saying that there's a cyber complaint.
She's claiming we've hacked her emails.
Yeah, and there's a crime branch complaint. The second possibility is that the Delhi police will actually
hacked her email. She's
claiming the reporters. She's insinuating that the reporters have hacked their emails, and she also. This was actually my personal favorite part of her responses. She posted a quote. She has posted on X. Her reading out loud a quote by Carl Bernstein on Real Journalism. Bernstein, I'm not getting the pronunciation correct, but we're talking about the journalist whose entire career elevated to fame because he reported on an American president's attempts at illegal surveillance. And I think it's supposed to be a pot shot at the News Minute and News Laundry's investigation to say that it's not real journalism. But yeah, sorry.
But you used the wrong journalist quote, I guess. No, but my point is, we were discussing that there are two options if we push the story a lot. One is Delhi police will take a case against us, or the Delhi police will go and find out who did rape the Swiss diplomat. Mostly it will be the former, but that's okay. In fact, through this program, I was thinking that imagine if we were Kunal Kamra. First, everybody appreciated Kunal Kamra. Then Pooja said Eknath Shinde being called is very less actually. There are worse things that have been said about him. Then Leena went and talked about the Sahib story. So altogether, this has been a wonderful program, which will be reason for various governments and polices to shut it down. But yeah, I think we should not.
Kunal Kamra ran and came off to Chennai. Here is Dhanya, who went from Bangalore all the way to Delhi.
Into the lion's mouth.
Into the lion's mouth saying, and doing a podcast saying, hey, I am here and I'm going to be here for some time.
But I have a question to you guys, okay? First of all, congratulations. Great job. Very persistent, very methodical. But here's my question. Over the months and months that both of you were spending days and nights discussing, minute details of it, did it once occur to you that after the story is out, Kiran Bedi is going to flood every social media platform, including WhatsApp, with incoherent messages? Did you guys anticipate this at all?
Sort of, yes. I mean, I first thought she may not even acknowledge it, but she has not disagreed with anything in the story, right? So, which is one good thing, that she has not said that what we have said is wrong. She's merely giving her reasons as to doing it and therefore legitimizing it. No, so one thing, Leena, Kunal Kamra did not flee to Tamil Nadu. He apparently has been living there for more than 4 or 5 years. He's farming in Tamil Nadu. What he has put is the Tamil Nadu police intention. And on that note, I want to add even Dr. Kafil Khan lives in Tamil Nadu. So two people, I don't know what Kunal Kamra's reasons are, but Kafil Khan did shift to Tamil Nadu because it is safer for him. But yeah, I'm also back in Bengaluru soon. Hopefully, the Delhi police will only be behind Nikita. Yeah. No, but we have to ensure that the whole purpose of the story is not lost, right? That it cannot be diverted to, I was a concerned mother and therefore I did this. I have a teenager too. If I'm concerned about him and I was a cop, then, this is a question we kept asking ourselves, like, would we have done it? So during the edit itself, we inserted the distraught mother, that she was a distraught mother multiple times, because we are not discounting that sentiment at all. That comes through in the emails also. But what does a distraught mother do? And what should others do to help her? Those are the questions before us, right? Anything else to add, Nikita?
No, I think you've encapsulated it.
I thought by, bringing her motherly affection into the story, you were trying to sympathize a lot with her. Whereas this is a case of unauthorized surveillance, somebody misusing their official position, and there is an obstruction of justice too, as far as I can see from this. And, I think you have been the most sympathetic to her in the report when even given these circumstances.
Okay, so we'll quickly move to the recommendations. Nikita, you want to do yours?
I go first.
Yes.
I read this really interesting book recently called Mood Machine. It's by this journalist called Liz Pelly, who's covered, I think, the music scene for very, very long. It's an investigation of sorts, not even of sorts, it is an investigation on Spotify and how Spotify has sort of completely altered the way in which we listen to music, because they realized that a lot of people are not looking to listen to music to be challenged. So, I keep saying this, that I feel like I used to listen to a lot more new music in college, and I feel like I'm still listening to the music I did then. Like, I haven't discovered new music in a while. And the book shows that
a lot of new music is very abusive, because my son listens and when I check the lyrics, I'm like shocked. Is this what they're actually singing?
I mean, partly it could be that, but the book's case is that it's also what algorithms of these platforms are designed to make us do. Because, the central sort of treatise of the book is that once they realize that a lot of people listen to music in the background, right, while I'm working or while I'm doing my chores.
It's banned in my office.
Like on
nobody can play music
on
loudly.
headphones, right? And you have these focus playlists or whatever. And so they thought, if people are anyway listening to music in the background, and if we have to serve up these anodyne tunes, with just the lo-fi sort of music that keeps going up and down, then why should we pay artists? So they hire a lot of these ghost artists.
But my recommendation is an interview by Karan Thapar of Justice Madan Lokur. It's related to what we discussed today. And he says that the judiciary accountability system right now is faulty, weak and toothless. I thought it was a brilliantly conducted interview, and Justice Lokur was as forthcoming as he usually is. And it gave a lot of clarity, because he's one of their own, he's an insider talking about how the judiciary works. So it's a 40-minute interview, and I recommend people watch it.
My recommendation for a book, not specifically related to Okay, if you want a recommendation for a book related to the judiciary, please read this book called Judge of the Supreme Court of India between 1950 to 87 by this recently deceased academic called George Gadbois. You'll enjoy it because he interviewed every single person who was a judge of the Supreme Court of India over a 20-year period. Those who had passed away, he interviewed their families. And this is where we get the most detailed numbers on the caste oligarchy point that you were talking about. He breaks it down by caste, he breaks it down by background, he breaks it down by parentage. And you get, it's unfortunate he has to stop at 87 because that's sort of when his research ended. And I know there are attempts to try and continue that work. I don't think it'll be possible because judges won't open up that easily these days. But it gives you a great idea of what our Supreme Court really is. Another book which has nothing to do with the Supreme Court, but one which I recommend to everyone whom I run into is D.R. Nagaraj's collection of essays called The Flaming Feet. Those of you who haven't read it, please read it. It is by far one of the finest collection of academic work by one of the most brilliant minds to have lived in not just Karnataka or Bangalore, but in India, who passed away very unfortunately in 1999. But it will completely change the way you think about Indian society, culture, caste, among many other things. So please do read D.R. Nagaraj's The Flaming Feet.
Okay, I'm next, and my recommendation is an NPR story. This is the most interesting story breaking out of the US with the inside story of how a journalist was sent White House war plans. So this is journalist Jeffrey Goldberg, who was added to a Signal group chat, which included Vice President J.D. Vance and the National Security Advisor, and they were discussing bombing the Houthis in Yemen. Now there are doubts that how credible this story is, given that given the history of who Jeffrey Goldberg is too. But I think this is one of the most interesting stories that is breaking out of US. And the second is something that doesn't need much shout out because everyone's Instagram feed and Facebook feed is now flooded by this Netflix special series, Adolescence. And TNM has done a massive story on how Andrew Tate and the manosphere is affecting the younger generation and driving men to more extreme behavior. I think Adolescence is a must watch for everyone.
I haven't watched Adolescence, though everybody's been recommending it. Because I think it'll be too shocking, but I'll try. I'm going to just recommend an old book. It's Kafka's The Trial. I feel like we should go to some of the dystopian writings again and again.
They may not seem as dystopic.
Yeah, in fact, now even the trial, the first portions do not seem very dystopian anymore. Like Joseph K., you can just be picked up from your house, a case put on you, arrested, and then the court looks like this weird place, right? But I do like to read dystopian novels again. Then I'll remind myself, hey, this is actually becoming real. So do read The Trial if you haven't. I'm sure most of you have. So that's about it on South Central this week. Next week, the show will be hosted by Pooja and Leena. So all the best for that. And thank you to our producer, Bhuvan. Thank you to Maria, Ajay, and our editor, Jasim Ali. And thanks to everyone at the News Laundry studio who's been helping us with the show for the last 2 weeks.
I just want to add that we complete 20 episodes. We keep thinking this is a brand new podcast, but we have finished 20 glorious episodes, and I am very sure all of you have thoroughly enjoyed watching it, and I'm very, very modest. But on a serious note, at some point, we plan to put this behind a paywall, but before that, you can become a member so that you can continue getting access to South Central.